Well, welcome everybody. We'll get started. My name's Chris Knight. I'm the Communications Director here at North Country Community College. And for those of you who are new to the college or our program, North Country Live was launched back in the spring of 2020, about a year ago, right at the outset of the COVID pandemic. And our goal was to continue to try and find a way to present programs that spark conversation and enrich our communities. And since that time, we've hosted more than 20 programs on a variety of different topics. We've done wellness, history, telecommuting. We have done a series this spring that's largely been focused on the environment and the outdoors. Adirondack water quality, climate change. Our previous session to this was on backcountry preparedness. And next week, as I mentioned, will be our final program of the spring series, which is going to be about birding. So we're excited to make that happen as well. The spring semester of programs is sponsored by International Papers, Ticonderoga Mill. So I want to thank IP for supporting North Country Live. And tonight we've got a great program and a perfect one to mark Earth Day, which is today. I'm excited to introduce our presenter tonight, Diane O'Connor, trained as a master gardener with Cornell Cooperative Extension. She maintains her own personal garden, as well as the Colonial Herb Garden at the Hancock House Museum in Ticonderoga. Definitely check that out if you get to this summer. As we continue, I'll ask everybody to keep their microphones muted during the program, but if you do have questions, you can type them into the chat and we will save some time for a Q&A at the end of Diane's presentation. So without any further ado, Diane, I'll turn it over to you and you can share your screen and kick us off.
Okay, make sure I'm doing this properly.
Yep.
Okay, we doing good so far. Well, thanks very much for joining us for this look at why we garden. I want to thank the college for inviting me and also Selena LeMay-Klippel and Chris Knight for their assistance. Tonight, we're going to take a look at the physical and emotional benefits of gardening. And I promise to toss in a few tips and techniques for establishing a healthy, happy garden that nourishes both body and spirit. Seems a little strange to be talking about gardening the same day that we were scraping ice off the front of our cars, but here we go. It's the North Country. Okay, there are a lot of good reasons to roll up your sleeves, slather on some sunscreen, and take to the garden. If you are a gardener, you're taking part in one of the most popular activities in the world and a hobby that many came to adopt during the COVID-19 epidemic. The coronavirus pandemic set off a global gardening boom that's been compared to the victory gardens of World War I and II, when American and British citizens grew enough food in backyard gardens to support the war effort and feed their families. Gardening made history last year. Burpee's Seed Company, a leading provider of seeds for gardeners, sold more seed in 2020 than at any time during its 144-year history. Johnny Selected Seeds, a favorite of mine, noted a 270% increase in normal spring sales. And the Stoke Seed Company sold 4 times its normal quantity of garden products. One manager at a supply house reported that he thought there was something wrong with his accounting software when he saw his sales numbers because they were 4 times higher than normal. Whoops, I just lost my PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So why did the pandemic cause people to take to their gardens? Well, from a mental health standpoint, strict lockdown rules meant that many of the activities that we usually derive joy and purpose from, things like socializing with friends, exercising, going out to eat, they were cut off for us. We weren't able to do these things. But a study that was recently published in the Journal of Landscape and Urban Planning finds that there's one surprising mood-boosting activity we can do, even if we're locked up alone at home, and that is tending a garden. The study showed that gardening boosts people's moods as much as some common types of exercise, like riding a bicycle or taking a walk. And that boost is available whether it's done alone or with others, whether it's done in a town or in a suburb or on a farm. And it seems to be particularly strong for women. Gardening can help reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. Gardening gives you a chance to focus on something and put your mind to work with a goal and a task in mind. This is especially helpful now. We've spent the past year really surrounded by the fear of illness and death. So it's very mentally helpful just to see things growing and thriving. Scientific studies abound to support the idea that immersing yourself in a quiet, natural environment not only helps your mental health, but also your physical state by lowering heart rate and blood pressure. So gardening is healthy both mentally and physically, and it also can help your self-esteem. Maybe you don't think you were born with a green thumb, but after tilling, planting, nurturing, and harvesting your garden, you might see a slightly different person in the mirror, a person who can grow things, a person who's just a little more in tune with the earth. It always feels good to accomplish new tasks. So if you can grow a garden, what can't you do? Gardeners eat better. While all types of gardening are shown to be beneficial to mental health, people who grow their own foods also derive a particular joy in tending to their plants. There's nothing more rewarding than planting and maintaining a vibrant vegetable garden and then enjoying the abundance of a fresh harvest. As most who garden can attest, the taste of fresh vegetables is far superior to anything you can purchase at the supermarket. There really is no comparison. It's also less expensive. A well-planted and well-maintained tomato plant can provide months of fresh tomatoes for your kitchen. And beyond their uses on your kitchen table, gardeners can use their skills in the medicine cabinet as well. Many natural herbal remedies can be made at home from plants and herbs that we grow, and they offer simple methods for treating minor complaints. Calendula, echinacea, lavender, chamomile, and many, many other commonly grown garden plants have medicinal values. Medicinal plants are useful to keep on hand to treat common ailments. You can reach for certain medicinal plants to relieve headaches, tummy trouble, irritation from bug bites, the common cold, and muscle aches. Plants can be consumed in teas, used as garnishes, applied topically as essential oils. Marigolds, yarrow, hyssop, chives, nasturtiums, parsley, sage, and a whole host of other herbs and flowers provide culinary and herbal advantages. One of the very best reasons to garden is for safe, healthy food. Reports of foodborne illnesses and contamination in foods have been widely publicized. Interest in organic gardening and the availability of organic produce has increased. We are all aware of additives and preservatives that are found in processed foods. An easy solution is to grow your own fruits and vegetables. The best way to know that the food you and your family eat is healthy and safe. Now, over the last few decades, the number of chemicals added to food and other products has skyrocketed. We add preservatives to food to keep them fresh. We add chemicals to food to make them look more appealing. We add chemicals to lotions and beauty products to make them feel, look, and smell nice. We did all of this for what seemed like good reasons at the time, but we're learning that many of these chemicals cause real harm. BPAs, nitrates, artificial coloring, and a host of other chemicals can all cause harm, especially to children. The answer to this is really found in homegrown food. Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria outbreaks are increasingly common in commercially grown foods. This is largely because of large-scale agriculture practices. Unlike other foodborne illnesses, not only has the rate of Salmonella infections failed to decline in the last 15 years, it's actually gone up by 10%. Salmonella sickens more than 1 million Americans every year. Now, the solution on the part of agribusiness to help prevent things like Salmonella and E. coli is to use chlorine as a decontaminant for fresh produce. I don't know about you, but I don't want my Brussels sprouts rinsed in Clorox. Okay, here's one of those tips. When you garden, your garden soil is your most important resource for success. And keep in mind, soil is not dirt. Soil is the substance that makes your garden great. Dirt is what you clean from the top of the refrigerator. To not begin with healthy garden soil is like building a beautiful house on a weak foundation. Your garden soil is a living organism. Give it what it needs, and your plants will send positive messages without a lot of work or additive on your part. So a healthy soil is comprised, there we go. Healthy soil is comprised of about 40 to 45% minerals, 25% water, 25% air, and about 5 to 10% organic matter. Now that organic matter includes bacteria, fungi, insects, worms, dead plants, and humus in long dead organic matter. That 5 to 10% makes a world of difference in how well your plants are going to perform. It's said that a tablespoon of soil contains a greater variety of species than all the mammals on Earth. That's a pretty diverse ecosystem in a tablespoon. And if you're not composting, please compost. Your kitchen has more than enough to keep your soil fertile. Your local Cornell Cooperative Extension service can assist you with soil testing. Soil testing is one of the most important things you can do to help increase the productivity of your garden. It's also going to help you save money, and it's going to protect the environment by keeping you from over-fertilizing your crops. There are home tests available, but the local Master Gardener program can help you test your soils and understand the results. And they can offer you services whether you are a small or a large-scale gardener. If you're not familiar with the extension program, every state has an extension program, which is usually administered by one of the larger universities. In New York, it is Cornell. In Vermont, it is UVM. That extension service administers the Master Gardener and 4-H programs, and it's a real wealth of solid scientific information about gardening. If you find yourself looking up gardening on the internet, remember, the internet is not vetted for as a source of information. My librarian husband frequently reminds me of that. So if you're searching for gardening information on the internet, add the term cooperative extension to your search term. It will bring forth well-researched, solid information that's backed by university research. Okay, back to why we garden. We garden for exercise. You can get all the exercise you need in your own backyard. Gardening activities provide both cardio and aerobic exercise. Studies show that an hour of moderate gardening can burn up to 300 calories for women and almost 400 calories for men. So think of mowing the grass as though you were taking a vigorous walk. Bending and stretching to plant a garden compares to an exercise class, and hauling plants and soil is similar to weightlifting. As we age, gardening can help reduce osteoporosis. It's also great for helping to maintain balance, and being outdoors helps provide much needed vitamin D. If you have physical limitations, there are adaptive tools that can help you get the job done. And there's some wonderful adaptive tools out there now. General gardening is a repetitive, low to medium impact form of exercise. It requires a certain amount of strength and stretching to perform. And this strength and stretching works all of the major muscle groups. And anybody who has ever gardened seriously knows about those sore muscles and how they remind us of those major muscle groups. Because of its low impact nature, gardening makes for an excellent activity if you are older, have disabilities, or suffer from chronic pain. And if that wasn't good enough, studies by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute score 30 minutes of gardening several times a week as a recommended way to battle high blood pressure. Studies from the British Journal of Sports Medicine say that activities such as gardening can cut the risk of heart attack and stroke and prolong life by as much as 30% in people who are 60 years or older. I think a real key reason why we garden, and one of the things that always pops to mind first, is that we garden for beauty. A garden can enhance any outdoor setting. A nice yard, a beautiful garden is a pleasure to look at and satisfying to live near. Sometimes it's as simple as adding a container of colorful flowers to a patio, or it could be acres and acres of trees and shrubs that provide color and shade, as well as shelter for birds and wildlife. Think of your garden as another room to be enjoyed, whether you are inside or outside of the house. Remember, to nurture a garden is to feed not just the body, but the soul. That may sound like warm, fuzzy talk, but scientists take it seriously. To help astronauts fight sensory deprivation and to ease the boredom and isolation of long missions, NASA researchers began gardening experiments. Using LED lights for 10 hours a day, space station crews grew zucchini, zinnias, sunflowers, soybeans, and more. The space farmers said they looked forward to checking their plants each day, and they were surprised at how seeing their bright colors helped their moods during weeks of dark orbit. What you're looking at in these pictures is the vegetable production system, known as Veggie. This is a space garden that resides on the space station. Veggie's purpose is to help NASA study plant growth in microgravity, but it also adds fresh food to the astronauts' diet, enhances happiness and well-being on the orbiting laboratory. We also garden to learn. You can learn by reading and you can learn by doing. Getting out and working with plants builds your gardening knowledge. Gardeners find that the more they learn about plants and gardening, the more they want to know. Plant problems lead to learning solutions. Removing a problem plant sometimes allows you the opportunity to try something else. There are many learning opportunities available through gardening with others or by joining in classes. There are a lot of gardening classes that are offered at little or no charge by community colleges, gardening centers, cooperative extension, and garden clubs. A 2017 evaluation conducted by Teachers College at Columbia University found that in schools that provide frequent high-quality opportunity for nutrition learning and gardens, Students eat up to 3 times more fruits and vegetables at school lunch, regardless of whether or not that food was grown in a garden. And these effects extend outside the school day too. In 2018, there was a randomized control study by Cornell University. That study found that children whose schools had gardens had more access to low-fat vegetables and fruits at home than children who did not have a gardening curriculum. Unlike lectures or worksheets on healthful practices, gardens provide an experiential, hands-on learning environment. Kids get the chance to smell the leaves of the tomato plant, to eat a carrot that they've just rinsed the dirt off of. Working in a garden is a real-world activity. It engages students and encourages them to explore and to reason independently. Helping maintain a school garden, research has shown that helping to maintain a school garden builds an emotional connection to food that's really essential to behavior change. When children spend weeks and months growing their food, they have a sense of pride and they feel connected to it. And this is the key to getting kids to eat right. Studies have also shown, and this is somewhat surprising, kids with school gardens do better academically, particularly in the sciences. And one of the reasons I like to garden personally is that I like to be creative. I like to try wacky new things. Gardening provides an outlet for creative and artistic expression. The serene contemplative mood of a Japanese garden or the romantic feel of a cottage garden, let your creativity flow. Try something new every season, a different plant, a different kind of garden, a different bulb. Treat yourself to something a little unusual in your garden. Perhaps it's time to let your creativity run wild. Think about a theme garden, a fairy garden, or anything that suits your fancy. Garden using non-traditional items, such as found pieces. One person's trash could be your ticket to a truly creative garden accent. And if you have a competitive streak, you might want a garden to win. This is a friendly way to show off your skills. County and state fairs, local garden clubs often have competitions, and this is a great chance to show off that giant pumpkin or perfect zinnia. 4-H clubs, if you work with children, promote gardening and offer educational opportunities for kids and a real healthy avenue for recognition. Garden for memories. I garden because my grandmother gardened, and the lessons that she taught me have stayed with me for my entire life. My daughter gardens because I gardened. Gardening is a great activity that can be shared with generations, children, grandchildren, the gardeners of tomorrow. Memories of past gardens and gardeners are cherished. Help build these memories for the next generation. Today's kids may well miss the joy of cutting a bouquet of flowers for mom or tasting the sweetness of a cherry tomato that was picked right out of grandpa's garden. You can also garden to make money. The love of plants can lead to a very rewarding job. You might work at a local garden center or own your own business. Whether growing flowers, vegetables, or herbs, there are opportunities to sell your products at local farmers markets and craft events. And garden to meet people. We've been so without socialization this last year. Gardeners love to share their gardens and their knowledge. Gardening is a great way to expand your social circle, whether it's with a neighbor who lives next door, or an internet pal on the other side of the world, or a regional garden club. Gardeners love to talk about plants. Meeting other gardeners through garden clubs, sharing extra plants, plant swaps, is an easy way to share information and to ask questions and to get involved. A lot of gardeners, and this is one of the tenets of the Master Gardener program, is volunteerism. help out at a community garden or a senior citizen center garden or a retirement community garden. It's very rewarding. I know one couple who individually loved to garden, eventually met up through an online dating site called greensingles.com, got married, and now have a very successful commercial farm down in Washington County. Gardening teaches us life lessons. According to the National Gardening Association, gardening is a great way to understand the lessons of life. Gardening teaches us about patience as we wait for vegetables to grow and ripen, responsibility as we're charged with their care, and even loss when flowers die at the end of the season. Gardening is a benefit to the community. The love of gardening and the beautification of the community really helps that region. Residents who live in areas with natural landscapes know their neighbors better, spend more time outdoors, and generally live in a safer environment. Beautifying roadways can have the dual effect of providing pleasing roadside landscape, while at the same time providing a natural median to make the roadway safer for surrounding communities. A growing phenomenon across the country that backs up this sense of community and gardening is the rising popularity of community gardens. Whether it's a neighbor with an extra plot of land or a group of row houses getting together on a vacant lot to share in spoils of happy gardening, community gardens bring neighbors and families together through hard work and a shared bounty. Garden for a Better World. This is Earth Day. Despite all of the benefits that gardening provides to us and our local communities, it provides an even greater benefit to the world around us. We have a symbiotic relationship with our plants. Through photosynthesis, we know that plants use sunshine to synthesize food from the carbon dioxide that we breathe out and the water that they take in through their roots. As a waste product, these plants send out oxygen, which in turn allows us to breathe. Plants can also contribute to removing pollutants in our waterways. Many eco-friendly gardeners are now creating rain gardens, which use native plants and unique reservoirs to capture and use runoff from rain, thus preventing pollutants from reaching streams and lakes and getting into our waterways. And finally, the plants that we plant help to provide both food and shelter to wildlife, allow for a diverse natural habitat. And I know you're all looking at that little deer thinking, what's he doing in my garden and how do I keep him out? Okay, 10 quick rules for successful gardening. And you may already be using these. If not, I hope you'll take them to heart. 1, prevent problems. Focus on preventing problems more than curing them. Proper preparation, appropriate choices for plants will all favor vigorous, healthy plants. Vigorous plants will avoid most diseases and pests. If problems do occur, identify the pest, the weed, the disease before treating it. Again, ask your extension master gardeners or a good garden center or go online to accurately identify your problem. Do not apply fertilizers or chemicals to a sick plant unless you're really sure you know what you're doing. Avoid stress for both you and your plants. When stressed, plants succumb to insects and diseases. To avoid plant problems, identify stress factors and work on correcting them. The problem can be too much or too little water, too much or too little sun, too much or too many nutrients, poor planting techniques, drainage, too much mulch or not enough mulch, animal or weed pressure, or some combination of all of that. Choose the right plant. Choose the right plant for the right place. Every plant has a preference for light, shade, soil moisture, and nutrient levels. It might live outside of its comfort range for a little while, but it's most likely not going to thrive. And don't be afraid to move a plant if necessary. Always plant native if possible. Native plants are adapted to the local climate and soil conditions where they naturally occur. These are really important plant species. Native plants provide nectar, pollen, and seeds that serve as food for the native pollinators living in that region, butterflies, insects, birds, and other animals. Unlike natives, the common horticultural plants that you might buy at a nursery that are not germane to this region, they don't provide energetic rewards, and they often require a lot of insect pest control in order to thrive. Native plants are going to require fewer fertilizers and fewer pesticides. They require less water, and they help prevent erosion. Native plants can significantly reduce water runoff and consequently flooding. Most of them don't require mowing, and excessive carbon from the burning of fossil fuels contributes to global warming. Native plants sequester and can help remove carbon from the air. They provide food and shelter for wildlife. They promote biodiversity and stewardship of our natural heritage. They're beautiful, and they increase our scientific value. You can go to the internet. The APA, the Adirondack Park Agency, publishes a list of native plants for this particular region, and it's a very helpful tool when you're planning your garden. Start with a soil test. We talked about this before. High or low pH or fertility that's not correct for your particular plants can stunt growth, burn roots, and stress plants. And do that soil test after you've added your mulch and compost, your soil amendments, because you want everything in balance. You want to be able to find out exactly what you're working with. Number 6, choose drought-tolerant plants whenever possible. Even here in the Adirondacks, drought can be an issue. And if you garden near a waterway, as we nearly all do up here, be aware of the dangers of runoff from your garden. Fertilizers and other garden additives can have a deadly effect on our rivers and lakes. Mulch. Mulch to reduce weeds and maintain soil moisture, but do not apply mulch thicker than 2 to 4 inches, and do not smother the roots of plants and trees with mulch. Roots have to breathe in order to stay healthy, and mulch volcanoes, like you see there on the right-hand side of the screen, are not good for trees. They'll hold water, promote rot, and they can smother roots. Practice diversity. Plant a diverse palette of plants to bring color through the seasons and to nurture a variety of insects. The good insects that you attract to your garden, the praying mantis, the dragonfly, the butterflies, they'll take care of many of your bad insect problems if the environment is hospitable. And if you do need insect or disease control, start with the least toxic option. Experiment with horticultural oil, such as neem oil, or insecticidal soap for insect control, and with some of the organic options for disease management. Plant diseases are not easily cured. Your best solution is not to let them get started in the first place. And number 10, just do it. Get out and garden. Even if you don't have a lot of yard space, you can have a small garden. You can benefit from growing a tomato in a pot on your patio. Flowers on a balcony or a front stoop can help you gain the benefits of this tremendous way of life. Now remember, humanity supposedly began life in a garden, and gardens have been an important part of the lives of kings, emperors, and plain folks like us. So when you garden, remember that you are part of something big, a process that's taken place for thousands of years and all across the globe. As a gardener, you are part of something much larger than that patch of soil in your backyard, and history proves it. As France fell to Nazi Germany in 1940, and US diplomats were boarding the last planes out of that country, one of these diplomats carried in his attaché the bud stock of a rose, which had been propagated by a French grower. When the Nazis occupied France, this grower was forced to give over his rose propagation to food production. In the United States, another grower received that bud stock and was amazed at the beauty of the resulting flower. On April 29th, 1945, the rose was christened the Peace Rose at the Pacific Rose Society annual exhibition. That was the very day that Berlin fell to the Allies. With the surrender of Germany on May 8th, 1945, the 49 delegates who met to form the United Nations were each presented with a peace bloom. Peace was named the winner of the All-American Rose selection in August of 1945, and the Peace Rose remains one of the most celebrated and popular roses in history, and it still thrives in gardens all across the world. You are connected to that. So I'll leave you with one last thought, and that's really best voiced by gardening columnist Adrian Higgins, who was writing in the Washington Post. The garden offers a lesson at this time. We live in societies and with technologies driven by short-term expectations, whether it's politics, business, or the next ping on your smartphone. The garden exists in the past, the present, and most of all in the future. To plant a shrub, a tree, or even a peony is to look forward a few years, perhaps a few decades, and provides a temporal perspective so often missing from a world made febrile by incessant stimuli. We should consider the foraging and strengthening of our relationships with the plant world and all its treasures. It is a bond that will bring us back to ourselves. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Diane. If
Okay.
that doesn't get you excited to go out and get started this spring, I don't know what is. That was amazing and so comprehensive. Thank you. I'm going to stop your sharing. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine.
And we'll jump back into the regular room here. And yeah, thank you. There are some questions in the chat that I'd like to see if we could tackle, if you're willing, if you're ready.
Okay.
All right. And for some reason your camera's off, but we'll see if you can click your button at the bottom to put it back on. And if not, that's okay. We can try and figure that out.
Okay, so I'm clicking the, wait a minute.
There we are.
How's that? There I am, I'm back.
Perfect. Okay, here's the first question for you. This is from Margaret. She loved all the blue plants that she saw in one of your pictures. Can you recommend some blue plants for the garden?
Certainly. Lavender, lupin, delphiniums. There's a whole host of blue plants that are out there. I'm particularly fond of lavender and lupin. And lavender can be a little tough to grow up here, but there are hardy varieties that will flourish.
Great. Susan asked, or she said, last year I had a terrible reaction to a bee sting. How can I plant to encourage bees, yet keep myself safe? That's a good question, right?
I think your best bet, and always plant to encourage bees. I would suggest that you look into good protective clothing, those wonderful netted hats, lightweight, long-sleeved shirts, gardening gloves that are perhaps a gauntlet style that comes up over the sleeve of your shirt. And then most bees are fairly docile, unless highly provoked, but certainly do garden for bees.
We need those pollinators, right?
Absolutely.
Shelley asked, she says she's planning to build a raised bed veggie garden. What depth of bed would you recommend?
That depends on what kind of vegetables you're going to be planting. I garden in raised beds. Most of mine are about 8 inches deep, and that's fine for most vegetables. Potatoes, I've made extra deep, and you can make them as deep as you really want them to be. You might start with an 8-inch raised bed, and over the years add a layer each year, which not only gives you the ability to plant to a greater depth, but it also eases your back as we get older.
Good point. Good point. Some accolades here from some folks too, thanking you. Thank you, Diane. Great presentation. And Becky Ledoux says, can't wait to get started after the snow melts.
Oh,
I think we're all feeling that right now, right? Here's another great garden bed question. Mike asked, when building a raised bed vegetable garden, what should I build the framing from? Concrete blocks? What kind of wood? I'm assuming no pressure treated lumber. What would you think about that?
You can use almost anything nowadays to build a good raised bed. Concrete block is perfectly fine. Check with your lumber yard. They used to tell us to use untreated wood. Hemlock was a good one that they would recommend. But honestly, it's been illegal to pressure treat wood with serious chemicals for quite a while now. It used to be they pressure treated lumber with arsenic-based things. So check with your lumber yard. You may be able to find material that's less expensive than some of the hemlock and sort of designer woods. You can also use straw bales. Straw bale gardening is very popular. And at the end of the season, people take the straw bales, turn them into their garden soil, and mulch for the next year. So.
Oh, that's neat. I never would have thought of that. Becky asked, what's the safest way to keep the animals out of your vegetable garden? The eternal question, right?
That is the single question I get asked the most.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of a number of things. I do not have a big problem with deer, but I have a 75-pound German Shepherd, and he is an excellent deer deterrent. Depending on what the pest is that you're dealing with, you might try, for deer, it's an ongoing challenge. It's everything from little bags of soap and human hair to fencing to all sorts of things. The best deer deterrent is a parallel fence around your garden that is about 4 feet apart between the two fence sections, with one section a little bit lower than the other section. That the deer tend to stay away from that because they don't have great depth perception, and it keeps them back a little bit. It's an expensive proposition, though, to double fence your garden. So if you're dealing with things like ground moles or ground hogs, things that are burrowing into your garden, you can consider burying your fence along the perimeter of your garden so that it's underground at least 2 feet. That can help a little bit. But the biggest thing is human presence. Human presence in the garden is the best thing to keep animals out of it. And I'm not a big proponent of glue traps or bird netting because they can be terribly cruel to animals that do get trapped in them. But the plastic owl works quite a bit for small rodents and other birds. But remember, if you're using things like that, you have to keep moving it around. You know, your scarecrow and your plastic owl, the animals will become acclimated to it when it doesn't move. So keep it going. And I have a friend in California who uses a motion detector sprinkler, and that's worked really well for her. And she also has a little statue of a dog that starts barking if anything goes across its little motion detector field. So that's been kind of a deterrent for her. So you really have to experiment and you have to be diligent. You can't let your guard down. So
one thought I had is that, if you don't want to put in or don't have the ability to do that double fence, so many of the community gardens I see have that. Another reason to maybe consider joining a community garden. You don't, I see so many of those bigger fences and they've got the infrastructure for everybody,
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
This was just one other point on the raised bed. Ellie asked, she says she'll be putting 4x4s in the corners. Do the bottoms get buried into the ground to secure the beds, or do they get cut flush with the frame? A little bit of a technical question there. I don't know if that's...
You can cut them flush with the frame, but they're going to tend to warp after a season or two. You can actually pin them in with rebar. You can also buy large things that look kind of like giant hairpins to help pin your beds down. But what I have done in the past and what I know other gardeners have done is to make those little 4x4 pins a little bit longer and to bury them down in the ground. And eventually any wooden raised bed is going to begin to rot. So you will have to replace it after a few years. But with a good one, you can get 5 to 7 years out of it without any problem.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diane. One or two more here, and then we'll kind of wind things down. But Margaret had a little bit of a story here. She said she had a beautiful, healthy poinsettia for over 2 years, and then it started to fail, and she didn't know why. She watered and fed it, gave it soil. It had plenty of light. It stayed in the same spot. My heart broke as I watched it die, and I could not prevent it from doing so. Do you know why this was and what I could have done to prevent it instead of just watching it fade away? Wow. Little detective work there. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Without seeing the body, I can't really do a good autopsy. Unfortunately, I just absolutely don't have a good answer for you. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, they just give up the ghost. They're not going to make it. So I am sorry, but poinsettias are plentiful. So by all means, make sure you try another one.
That's one of those life lessons. Exactly, right? Keep trying if it doesn't work the first time around. I was going to ask, this isn't in the chat, but a question I had. You said you maintain the herb garden at the Hancock House.
Yes.
And I'm curious, for people that are interested in that type of garden, what have you found, kind of works the best here in the North Country? Granted, I know there are different, parts to the North Country up here in Saranac Lake Placid, maybe compared down to the valley where you are there, but what's been successful there for you?
Well, compared to Saranac Lake and Lake Placid, we're kind of the Riviera down here in Ticonderoga. We have the advantage of being right in between Lake George and Lake Champlain, so we do get a little bit warmer air coming in. We've had great luck with the herb garden, the Colonial Herb Garden at the Hancock House. And for those of you who don't know, the Hancock House is a Georgian Revival museum located in Ticonderoga that is a replica of John Hancock's house, which stood in Boston. We started the Colonial Herb Garden about 4 years ago and decided that it would have herbs and flowers that all had been used in colonial times for either culinary or medicinal purposes. So we've had great luck with the garden. We have a nice cadre of volunteers who've kept it going. We've had great luck with things like calendula, which is an annual but self-seeds so much that you will think it's a perennial. It's an edible flower. Its petals can be used in soups and stews and salads. There's an extract. It's used herbally for pain management. It's an anti-inflammatory, and it's just a beautiful bright orange flower. It's a lovely, lovely thing. Chamomile and coneflower has also been real successful in the Colonial Herb Garden, and these are things that are very easy to grow and will come back year after year after year. We've had great luck with bee balm with Monarda, which is, again, an edible plant and used to treat a variety of things from headaches to infections and as an anticoagulant. The leaves of the Monarda were actually chewed on the battlefield for this particular purpose. And it's a beautiful plant that comes back every year and has lots of colors. You can get it in purple, you can get it in white, you can get it in pinks and reds, and it's lovely. And all of those flowers are great pollinator attractors. So we've had a wonderful array of butterflies and caterpillars and things coming through the garden at different times of the year. So
you're gardening to preserve history down there too, which is pretty cool. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
So there aren't any more questions in the chat, but I'd certainly, if anyone else did have any, you could unmute and ask it, I think, at this point too. And if not, we'll wrap up. But if somebody did have one, you could go ahead right now.
And if anyone does have a question that occurs to them later, you can always find me at the Hancock House in Ticonderoga. You can find our email address on the internet. So feel free to let me know what you think or if you have any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Diane. This was a treat. I really appreciate you doing this, and I know we all got so much out of it. So I know on behalf of everybody in the Zoom room, thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you for being such a wonderful audience.
I will remind folks that we will have this video archived on our website, which is, I'll type it into the chat here, which is nccc.edu/live. And all of our other North Country Live videos are in there too. That should be up sometime tomorrow. We'll get it up there. Again, thanks to Diane for joining us tonight and for a great presentation. I also want to thank our sponsor, International Paper, and the Ticonderoga Mill for supporting North Country Live. We'll be back again next week at the same time with our last program of the spring series, which is all about birds with Joan Collins. So yeah, we're excited to welcome folks back again next week. Thank you, everybody, for being here.